The night had been crafted down to the finest detail, every piece meticulously planned to create a moment Emily would never forget. Liam had spent months orchestrating it, secretly figuring out her ring size by borrowing one from her jewelry box, carefully selecting a diamond that would catch the light just right and choosing a band that perfectly matched the one she had pointed out in a store months ago. He had booked the rooftop venue where they had shared their first date, a place filled with memories of whispered promises and hopeful dreams. Everything had been set in motion to make this night the kind of fairy tale proposal people talked about for years. Ryan had been instrumental in helping him piece it all together. He had been there to reassure Liam whenever the anxiety crept in, reminding him that Emily would love it, that she would say yes, that she would cry in the best way possible when she saw the candlelit pathway leading up to the proposal spot. Sarah, Emily's best friend, had also played her part, suggesting the perfect dress for Emily to wear that night, casually nudging her into getting her nails done without suspicion, helping Liam pick out flowers that matched her favorites. It was supposed to be magical. Liam had spared no effort. The invitations had been subtle enough to avoid giving away the surprise, just a casual rooftop gathering, a little celebration among close friends and family. Nothing that would tip Emily off to the life-changing moment that awaited her. Yet, standing in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie for the 5th time, he couldn't shake the strange feeling that something was off. Emily had been distant lately, her mind seemingly elsewhere even when they were together. There had been late nights at work, hushed phone conversations that stopped the second he walked into the room, and an uncharacteristic reluctance whenever he brought up their future. He had chalked it up to stress. She had always been ambitious, always pushing herself to achieve more, and lately, she had been overwhelmed with new responsibilities at work. He had convinced himself that was all it was, just the weight of her career demanding more from her, leaving less space for them. Still, the feeling gnawed at him. He ran through his speech one last time, the words flowing easily in his mind. He imagined her reaction, the way her hands would fly to her mouth in shock, the tears welling in her eyes as she nodded through the emotion, the applause and cheers from the gathered guests. He had envisioned it 100 times, each version more perfect than the last. Sarah had assured him Emily would love it. Ryan had told him he had nothing to worry about. They had all been wrong. Because while Liam had been planning the most important night of his life, Emily had been planning hers, too. But her plans didn't include him. Sarah had known. She had known for months. Every time Liam had confided in her, sharing his excitement about the proposal, every time he had asked for advice or checked small details, she had smiled and nodded, playing the role of the supportive friend. But beneath it all, she had been covering for Emily's lies, excusing away the inconsistencies, deflecting any suspicions that might have surfaced. And Liam, trusting, devoted, blind, had walked straight into the trap. Now, as he stood in front of everyone, the moment he had dreamed of seconds away from unfolding, he was about to learn just how deep the betrayal ran. Liam had rehearsed this moment in his mind for months. Every word, every movement, every carefully placed detail had led to this. He stood in the center of the rooftop, the city lights stretching endlessly behind him, casting a warm glow over the gathered guests. The violinists had just begun to play softly in the background, their music weaving through the air like something out of a dream. The ring sat heavy in his pocket, the weight of a promise waiting to be made. His voice was steady as he spoke, his heart full of certainty. He poured his emotions into every word, recounting the moment he knew he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Emily. He could see the anticipation in the faces of their friends and family, the way some guests already had their phones out, poised to capture the moment she said yes. Then, in the middle of his heartfelt confession, her phone buzzed on the table. The sound was subtle, almost insignificant against the music and murmurs of the crowd. But it was enough to pull his eyes toward it. Without thinking, his gaze flickered to the screen. A single notification. A text message. His world cracked open. "I can't wait to marry you tomorrow. Love, Mark." The words didn't register at first, his brain refusing to process what his eyes had just seen. But the more he tried to reason it away, the clearer the reality became. Tomorrow. Mary. Mark. The letters blurred for a moment, his mind struggling to find a rational explanation, something that would make sense of the sheer impossibility of what he was looking at. He felt a cold wave of disbelief wash over him, followed by something hotter, sharper, more suffocating. Betrayal. Across the table, Emily stiffened. It was a fraction of a second, so quick that no one else seemed to notice, but Liam saw it. He saw the way her breath caught, the way her eyes darted to the phone, the way her fingers twitched ever so slightly as if resisting the urge to snatch it up before he could react. But it was too late. He barely noticed the way the music faltered, the subtle shift in the air as a few guests glanced at each other, sensing something was off. All of it faded into the background as a single, inescapable truth settled over him like a crushing weight. Emily was engaged to another man. And she had planned to marry him tomorrow. The realization struck like a physical blow. He felt detached from himself, as if watching from the outside as his carefully built reality shattered in an instant. The ring in his pocket, the speech he had spent weeks perfecting, the intimate, private joy he had imagined when she said yes, it was all meaningless now. Emily made a sudden movement, reaching for her phone with a look of desperate panic. But Liam was faster. With one swift motion, he picked it up before she could get her hands on it. He felt her fingers brush against his, frantic, her breath catching as she realized the situation had slipped completely from her control. For a moment, time stood still. The rooftop, the guests, the city lights, all of it seemed frozen as he slowly turned to face the crowd. He had to say something. He had been moments away from getting down on one knee, from offering his life to this woman in front of everyone who mattered to them. Now, standing there with the evidence of her betrayal burning in his hand, he understood that silence would never be enough. His voice didn't waver. Well, I guess I'm not the only one with a big question tonight. It was casual. Almost too casual. And that made it even more devastating. A ripple of confusion spread through the guests, the weight of his words sinking in by degrees. Then, slowly, he held up the phone for everyone to see. A collective gasp swept through the crowd. Murmurs rose like an oncoming storm, confusion giving way to shock, then to something more. The betrayal was laid bare, undeniable. The screen, illuminated in the dim rooftop light, was a glowing beacon of infidelity. Emily had been caught. Her breath came fast now, her mouth opening and closing in wordless horror. She stepped forward as if she could somehow undo this, as if she could take back what had already been exposed. A pathetic stammer escaped her lips, an attempt to control the narrative before it spiraled beyond her reach. But Liam wasn't interested. The guests whispered among themselves, the weight of the moment spreading like wildfire. Some stared at Emily with wide eyes, their expressions shifting between disbelief and disgust. Others turned to Liam, waiting for what he would do next. Sarah had gone pale. Ryan stood rigid, his jaw clenched as he exchanged a look with Liam that said everything. They had all been deceived. Liam let the phone drop back onto the table with a hollow sound, his hands now free, as if releasing the last tangible connection he had to the woman who had just destroyed him. The proposal was over. But the reckoning had just begun. Chaos erupted the moment the message was exposed. The rooftop, once buzzing with warmth and celebration, now simmered with disbelief and whispered speculation. Guests exchanged stunned glances, some covering their mouths in shock, others shifting awkwardly as they tried to process what had just unfolded. Emily crumbled. Her face, once glowing with the flattering rooftop lights, drained of all color. The panic in her eyes was unmistakable, her breathing uneven as she fumbled for control of a situation that had already slipped completely through her fingers. Then came the excuses. She reached for Liam, pleading, her words tumbling out too fast, too desperate. They were meaningless fragments of an unraveling defense, strung together in a way that might have worked in private, but here, under the weight of so many watchful eyes, they were pathetic. The more she spoke, the more she revealed. Liam stood still, his expression unreadable as he let her unravel, let her dig herself deeper into the hole she had so carefully crafted. The lies were weak, contradictions lacing through every frantic sentence. She spoke of misunderstandings, of intentions that had never materialized, of choices that hadn't yet been made. She swore the text wasn't what it looked like, that explanations could clear this up, that if he just listened, just believed her one more time, everything would be fine. Liam wasn't listening. He had believed her for months. He had trusted in the late nights, the unexplained absences, the vague dismissals of his concerns. He had let himself be blind because love had convinced him to. But love wasn't here anymore. All that remained was humiliation, cold and undeniable. Ryan and a few others moved in, sensing the tension escalating beyond control. They placed careful hands on his shoulders, speaking in hushed voices, urging him to walk away before things got worse. But worse than what? Worse than standing in front of his entire family, his closest friends, and the woman he was supposed to marry, realizing that he had been nothing more than a backup plan. Worse than months of commitment, of love, of planning, all reduced to a joke at his expense. No. Liam wasn't leaving yet. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. The room around him felt distant, the murmurs and stares fading into nothing as he searched for answers he already knew existed. His fingers moved with a sense of detached purpose, pulling up her social media, something he had never once felt the need to scrutinize before. It took seconds. There it was. A private album, locked behind a familiar heart emoji. A collection of moments carefully hidden from him, snapshots of a life she had been living behind his back. Liam didn't need to open it. He knew exactly what was inside. Pictures of them, Emily and Mark. Laughing. Holding hands. Existing in a reality that Liam had never been a part of. Proof that she had moved on long before this night, while still keeping him on standby, just in case. He felt nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a sharp, cutting clarity that burned away whatever attachment he had left to her. His gaze lifted from the screen to Emily. He took in the way she stood, small, guilty, exposed. She wasn't the confident, radiant woman he had fallen for. She was something else entirely now. Someone desperate. Someone who had lost control of her own game. He didn't need to humiliate her further. She had done that to herself. But there was one last thing he wanted to say. He cast her a final glance, as if sealing the moment in his memory, before letting his voice carry through the stunned silence. And with that, Liam turned his back on her, on the night he had once imagined as perfect, on the illusion of love he had spent years believing in. He didn't need to see her reaction. He didn't care about the aftermath. All that mattered now was that he was done. Liam could have walked away. He could have let the night end with Emily's disgrace on the rooftop, left her to pick up the shattered pieces of her double life, and moved on without another word. But she had lied to him for months. Played him. Made him believe in a future that had never been real. And Liam wasn't the type to let someone like her walk away without consequences. By the time he reached his apartment, the shock had hardened into something sharper. He wasn't just going to be another one of her mistakes. He wasn't going to let her rewrite the story, twist the truth, and paint herself as the victim. She had spent months crafting an illusion. Now, he was going to tear it down. Ryan was the first to show up. He didn't need to say anything, his presence alone was enough to let Liam know he was ready to help. But the real surprise came from Sarah. Racked with guilt and unable to keep up the act any longer, she had come clean. Every lie, every excuse she had covered for Emily, every time she had reassured Liam that things were fine when she knew the truth. She had believed she was protecting her friend, but in reality, all she had done was delay the inevitable. Now, she wanted to make it right. With her help, Liam pieced together everything. The overlapping timelines, the excuses that hadn't added up, the nights Emily had claimed to be busy, while she was really with Mark. Sarah provided the final, undeniable proof, texts, photos, and plans Emily had made for her wedding while still wearing the promise ring Liam had given her. That was all Liam needed. The mass email went out first. Every single person on the guest list for Mark's wedding received it. A detailed breakdown of Emily's deception, carefully outlined with dates, proof of her engagements to two different men at the same time. Liam had no interest in anger or revenge for revenge's sake, this was about truth. Mark had a right to know. His family had a right to know. The guests who were about to witness a wedding based on lies had a right to know. Within minutes, the damage began to unfold. The screenshots followed. Liam made sure they reached the right people, Mark's friends, his groomsmen, his colleagues. It didn't take long for the information to spread. Emily's betrayal had been meticulously hidden for months, but now it was out in the open, spreading across social circles like wildfire. Then came the final blow, the post on Liam's social media. A simple, direct statement. No anger, no bitterness. Just the truth. He laid it all out, the love he had given, the lies he had believed, and the moment it all fell apart. A single caption that ensured everyone who knew them would understand exactly who she was. By morning, Emily had lost both men. Mark called off the wedding immediately. There was no discussion, no salvaging it. His family, humiliated and furious, withdrew every bit of support they had given her. Her own friends, some of whom had been unknowingly helping her plan both relationships, turned their backs on her. The fallout was swift and brutal. But the best part? Mark had put down a non-refundable deposit on the wedding venue. The same venue Liam had booked for his proposal. And now, instead of vows being exchanged, instead of guests gathering to celebrate a love that never truly existed, Emily's big day had turned into a spectacle of her own downfall. The venue stood empty, a reminder of everything she had lost in a single night. Liam had never considered himself the kind of guy who needed dramatic payback. He wasn't the type to hold grudges, nor did he waste time plotting ways to make someone suffer. Life had a way of balancing itself out, and in most cases, people who thrived on deception eventually destroyed themselves. But this? This was different. Emily had built two separate lives, playing both him and Mark like a game of chess, thinking she was smart enough to win without consequence. She had been so careful, so confident in her ability to keep everything under wraps, convinced that neither of them would ever find out. She had manipulated, lied, and betrayed, without hesitation, without remorse. And now, she had nothing left. Her wedding day arrived, but there was no ceremony, no vows, no future to step into. The venue stood empty, a hollow space where her perfect fantasy had collapsed in on itself. Guests who had once been excited to celebrate a love story were instead swapping stunned messages, trying to make sense of the whirlwind disaster that had unfolded in a matter of hours. Emily had gone silent. Her social media accounts had either been locked or wiped clean, as if she could erase the humiliation by deleting evidence of her own existence. Friends who had once adored her now wanted nothing to do with her. Family members, humiliated by her choices, refused to defend her. Liam could have let it end there. But he couldn't resist one final touch. That night, while Emily should have been walking down the aisle, Liam sat in a crowded bar with Ryan, Sarah, and a few other close friends. Laughter filled the air, the clink of glasses mixing with the low hum of music in the background. It was the complete opposite of the broken, miserable scene playing out somewhere across town. And then, with the kind of effortless ease that only true poetic justice could bring, he pulled out his phone and took a picture. A snapshot of him and his friends, raising their champagne glasses. Smiling. Celebrating. And then he posted it. Cheers to dodging a bullet. Hope Mark's doing okay. Bottle with popping cork. It was perfect. The post exploded. Within minutes, likes and comments flooded in. People who had attended the rooftop gathering, mutual friends who had been caught in the fallout, even strangers who had stumbled across the story through whispers and speculation, they all saw it. Some called it legendary. Others simply said, "This is how you handle betrayal." Screenshots spread like wildfire. Groups that had once talked about wedding arrangements were now dissecting every detail of the scandal. Those who had doubted Liam's version of events quickly changed their tune when the overwhelming weight of the truth came crashing down. Emily had wanted attention, validation, admiration. Now, she had it, but for all the wrong reasons. She didn't respond. Not publicly, not privately. Mark, on the other hand, did. It wasn't immediate. Liam figured the guy had been dealing with his own version of hell, processing the realization that the woman he had been ready to marry had never truly been his to begin with. But when he did reach out, it was clear that betrayal had burned them both. The two of them weren't friends, not really. They had only ever known each other as distant acquaintances, two men who had unknowingly been placed in a competition neither had agreed to. But now, they had something in common. So they met for a drink. Not to bond over heartbreak, but to acknowledge the absurdity of it all. They sat at a quiet bar, a shared understanding passing between them without the need for too many words. Neither of them had lost anything of value. Emily had. Liam moved on, stronger, sharper, wiser. There was no bitterness, no lingering resentment. Just the quiet satisfaction of knowing he had walked away on his own terms, without letting her drag him down with her. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply stepping back and letting the truth do the work. Emily had played her game and lost everything. And as Liam leaned back in his seat, drink in hand, watching the chaos continue to unfold in real time, he had just one thought. Damn, that was worth every second.